Welcome to my new movie series in which I watch my top 100 movies on Flickchart from 100 down to 1 and figure out whether those movies still belong in my top 100. Today, we're revisiting A Fish Called Wanda. So A Fish Called Wanda is a movie I first saw with my dad. He was a big fan of it and we watched it together. Note that I did grow up pretty religious, so we initially watched it through one of those websites or services that takes all the potentially objectionable things out of movies and then sends them to people. So I missed a lot of pieces and only really got the full picture of what the story was later as an adult. It definitely works better intact. And it still works pretty well for me on a lot of levels. Going into it, I knew that I remembered really liking the characters and the broad comedy, especially that of Kevin Kline. I've been both a Kevin Kline fan and a Monty Python fan for a large portion of my life, so this one was obviously going to align pretty well with those interests. A quick recap of the plot for anyone new to it. I'm not going to give away too many spoilers. Jamie Lee Curtis plays Wanda, a criminal who is part of a bank heist with her lover Otto, played by Kevin Kline. They plan to turn in their former accomplice to take the fall for them, take the jewels for themselves, and flee. But when it turns out that the accomplice has moved the jewels to a new hidden location, Wanda has to step up and keep playing the game to find out where it's gone. This involves getting really friendly with their accomplice's lawyer, played by John Cleese. The character is named Archie Leach, in a tribute to Cary Grant's real name. Michael Palin rounds out this cast of four as a member of their bank heist who has a fondness for animals and a sometimes debilitating stutter. What struck me as particularly interesting on this watch was how much of the comedy is centered around the theme of confidence, particularly confidence being attractive or unattractive. Much of Wanda's journey to get what she wants, money and a comfortable life, revolves around latching herself onto the men around her who can help her accomplish it. She's certainly very capable on her own, but she can accomplish her goals faster and easier if she has a partner. So we see her working in different ways with Otto and with Archie. And the strongest comparison between these two, where most of the comedy comes from, is that Archie is deeply insecure and unconfident, despite being a fairly competent person, whereas Otto has a completely inflated and unrealistic sense of his own ego and his own importance in the world. These two characters' comedic moments almost always come out of this. Despite how different they are and how they actually react, they both follow the same comedic theme. When Archie's ego is threatened, he shrivels up and panics and blusters his way around, and no one really takes him seriously, while Otto, when his ego is threatened, goes completely off the rails, starts shooting people, starts making up elaborate lies to save his skin, and both of these reactions are played for different kinds of laughs. Confidence is, of course, one of the things that draws Archie to Wanda in the first place. She challenges his quiet and unassuming way of life and boosts his confidence in himself. At one point, he talks about how paralyzing it is to be afraid all the time of embarrassment, and Wanda's confidence and openness and free spirit encourage him to try things that he normally wouldn't. When this conversation first came up in the film, I wondered for a moment if the movie was going the way of sending the message that living confidently is the most obvious way to live, and that even messing up would be better than not living at all. But it is more nuanced than that, because we have someone like that. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Otto, who, in practice, does all the things that Archie is afraid to do with a seeming amount of true confidence, but it doesn't work for him. He isn't seen as the cool guy in comparison to Archie's insecurity. And why? Because his actual capabilities and his actual intelligence don't match the confidence he has. It's not about having more confidence, it's about having the appropriate amount of confidence. Wanda is our middle ground here. She is confident, but she's earned it. She knows her limitations, she knows when she needs to give up, she knows when she needs to brainstorm new ideas, when to stand up for herself, when to give in, when to step out, and when to hide. And interestingly, she seems to be the only one in this movie who doesn't have any insecurities that she's trying to cover up or make up for. At least not any that really come to light. And this is one of the reasons that she is portrayed as the most attractive person in the film. Now, of course, confidence doesn't make you a good person. Wanda certainly isn't. But an appropriate amount of confidence does make it easier for an audience to root for you. The film here is ultimately working to redistribute the inappropriate confidence amounts that both of our male leads have, and we can sense instinctively that this is where it's going to end up. As we get to the final third of the film, we know that what we need to see for it to be a satisfying ending is for Otto's ego to get deflated and Archie's to be inflated, to match the level of competency that each has. And that, of course, is exactly what happens. That balancing is what makes this ending so satisfying on every level. While it's not as clear-cut as it is with the main two, I want to point out that Michael Palin's character is also connected to this theme of appropriate confidence. One of his ongoing subplots is that he has a stutter that doesn't seem to bother him until Kevin Kline comes along and spends his whole time mocking him for it. Like many speech impediments in real life, drawing attention to it makes it worse for Palin, and his abilities seem to get swallowed up in constantly being shot down for one thing he can't do. And this appears to maybe have consequences on the rest of his actions. We're told he is competent and reliable at his criminal work, but at one point he's given the task of eliminating the only witness to their crime, and that's where we follow him most of the time, where he tries multiple times only to fail over and over again. In the final moments of the movie, Palin finally sees Otto, his enemy, get his comeuppance, and he gets revenge for the cruelty that's been wreaked upon him. And immediately after, he realizes that his stutter is gone. While, as I said, speech impediments in reality can be tied to levels of confidence in speaking, and stress or insecurity can make it worse in some instances, but it's, of course, not as clear-cut as it is in this movie. Palin presumably stuttered before meeting Klein, and suddenly overcoming him doesn't mean his stutter is gone forever. But it is another tie to the theme running throughout the story, that it is good for one's confidence to match one's ability, and more, that it is bad for you to keep someone else's confidence from matching their ability. As far as whether the movie deserves to be in my top 100 or not, I'm kind of torn. This is one of those movies where I really, really love large portions of it, and then there are sections that fall just a little bit short. But I feel like that's probably true of most movies in this list. Not every movie can be 100% enthralling from beginning to end, or at least very few. So the question is, do the parts that I really love about this movie keep it in the top 10? I think probably. I was really drawn into the satisfying literary devices where everybody is kind of evened out in the end, and there are still so many really funny line deliveries and facial expressions and throwaway sentences, and very few things that wear out their welcome for me. And it hasn't aged as badly as I thought it might, although it does have some homophobic jokes, and obviously the way they handle the stutter is not necessarily the most sensitive. Those moments may make it not worth it for everybody, but I suspect if it doesn't stay in my top 100, it will still stay in my top 200. Let's find out. So the way Flickchart works is, when I first rank a movie, it goes up against the movie in the very middle of my chart, and I choose which one I like better. So if I decide it's above the one in the middle, it then looks at the middle of this new section of my chart, and so on until it finds the appropriate spot. A lot of these movies will probably go up against the same set of movies, because since so many of them are in my top 100 or near it, we'll probably get the same set of middle movies most of the way up. So first up, we have A Fish Called Wanda versus Beauty and the Beast, the French version from 1946. I'm a huge fan of the Disney version of Beauty and the Beast, and while the images and the cinematography of this 1946 one are very lovely, I don't find myself drawn in by the story at all. So sitting in the middle of my chart seems about the appropriate place, acknowledging what is good about it, while also acknowledging that it doesn't really move me. A Fish Called Wanda is definitely going to beat this one. Next up, A Fish Called Wanda goes up against La La Land. La La Land is too high on my flick chart. I was swayed by how much I love musicals when I first ranked it, and it landed a little higher than it should have. Since actually, even though I love musicals, I don't think this is a particularly well done one. A Fish Called Wanda definitely is going to win above La La Land. It was not nearly as disappointing in execution. Now we get to A Fish Called Wanda versus The White Tiger, a movie I saw last year. The White Tiger is a really solid story, but the longer it's been since watching it, the more it's kind of faded from my recollection. So A Fish Called Wanda has more memorable moments and more moments I'd want to revisit, so it's going to win here as well. Getting a little bit higher on the chart, A Fish Called Wanda is now up against 28 Days Later, the zombie movie from Danny Boyle. I haven't seen 28 Days Later in a long time. It would actually be a prime candidate for this kind of rewatch. I remember really enjoying it, but I think when it comes down to it, the funny moments in A Fish Called Wanda are going to trump the scary moments of 28 Days Later in terms of what I would rather watch. And I guess that's what I'm ranking on this time. Like I said, it's an entirely subjective choice about how you rank your own movies on your own chart. I think A Fish Called Wanda is going to keep this one. Now we have A Fish Called Wanda versus Harvey. Harvey is another one that's difficult for me to rank because like so many movies in the top 200, 300 of my chart, I haven't seen this in a long time. Last time I saw it, I remembered being a little less impressed by it. James Stewart is obviously incredible in this movie, but the story as a whole doesn't sit for me as well as it might. I do have a sense that if I went back and rewatched this, that a lot of the mental health stuff would not age well. But I don't know. I haven't seen it in such a long time. I think I'm going to go with A Fish Called Wanda. This might be the first one that would raise it higher. I don't think Harvey is in my top 100, and I don't think it should be. This is the first choice that is really, truly difficult for me. We have A Fish Called Wanda versus Inside Out. So Inside Out is probably my favorite Pixar. I don't think it's reflected in that in my chart, but it should be, because Inside Out made me ugly cry in the theater when I first saw it. A Fish Called Wanda is great, but it doesn't have that kind of intense emotional connection. What I enjoy about it is it makes me laugh. It's got so many great little throwaway lines. It's a lot of fun to watch, but it doesn't touch my soul the way that Inside Out does. And Inside Out is also funny and fun to watch. So I think this will be the first one where Fish Called Wanda will lose. Let's see where that lands it on the chart. All right, that keeps it at 100. Inside Out must have been ahead of that. So next up we have A Fish Called Wanda versus The 7-Year Itch. The 7-Year Itch is one that I'm a little worried to revisit. I think it is in my top 100, which means I will have to revisit it. But I remember thinking that the main character was a little despicable even the last time I watched it. And while Billy Wilder's writing can absolutely make despicable characters enjoyable to watch while not rooting for them, I'm not sure if that would stand up. I suspect A Fish Called Wanda and the humor in it would land still better than The 7-Year Itch. So let's see if it will stay. I don't know where 7-Year Itch is on my flick chart, so we'll see if this will push it up further into the top 100 or pull it further down. Oh, and apparently 7-Year Itch is further up on my chart. So we will have to see where that lands when I rewatch it. So right now that put A Fish Called Wanda from number 100 to number 85, which is definitely not correct. So we'll have to keep playing with this and see what we get. Now we have A Fish Called Wanda versus AI Artificial Intelligence. I do absolutely love this movie. I find it heartbreaking. I'm very excited to rewatch it when we get back to it because it has been a while, and I think it will still hit me the same way because even just remembering the story makes me a little teary-eyed. So I think I'm going to still go with AI and assume that Fish Called Wanda is not going to stand up to that. This is where we start seeing where my top 100 is a little out of whack. So we have A Fish Called Wanda versus Star Spangled Girl, which we'll get to in the challenge when we get to it. It's a Neil Simon play, and it's very light on the idea of stalking and very friendly toward it. And it probably shouldn't be, and I think that will probably bother me when I rewatch it. But I remember just enjoying so much. Neil Simon's writing is so funny and so charming and so delightful that I don't know. I'm gonna go for Star Spangled Girl for now, but I think A Fish Called Wanda may turn out to be better. Star Spangled Girl may sour when I rewatch it for this challenge. Now we have A Fish Called Wanda versus 1776, the musical about, one of now 2 musicals about the founding fathers of America. 1776, I think, is going to take it here because I know I'm very confident in its quality and how much I like it. It's got some amazing music, some really, truly wonderful tunes, and it's going to win here over A Fish Called Wanda, which is a little bit more back and forth. A Fish Called Wanda versus Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park has been a long time since I've seen it as well. I think the Jurassic Park is still going to take it. I think it's a more consistent movie than Wanda, even though its highs are not quite as high for me, but its lows are also not quite as low. So we're going to give it to a Jurassic Park for now. Our last matchup is a movie that I did not think was in my top 100. Not that it doesn't deserve to be there, I just didn't anticipate it. And that's What We Do in the Shadows. So I've been watching the TV show and really enjoying it. I'm sure I would love the movie again if I went back and rewatched it. I bet it's more consistent than A Fish Called Wanda. I bet it's more entertaining. Some of this is really tough because I know I'm going to be rewatching these soon, and then maybe it will get all squiggled around. I'm going to go with What We Do in the Shadows for now. I bet it's better. A Fish Called Wanda did move from 100 on my flick chart up to 85, which was not really what I was looking for. I was anticipating it being down around 159. I think what that probably means is that the 7-Year Itch is too high on my chart. And so when I get to it, I'll end up ranking it down, unless it surprises me. Who knows? So the next movie we'll be tackling will be Doubt, the 2008 film written and directed by John Patrick Shanley. This is one of my favorite plays, but I've only seen the film the one time. I remember it having incredible performances. It has a heck of a cast. Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl Streep and Amy Adams and Viola Davis are just like a powerhouse of actors, and I imagine it will still be solid. Will it be number 99 solid? That I don't know, but we will find out next time. Feel free to watch Doubt along with me and tell me how you feel about A Fish Called Wanda. We'll see you next time.